Welcome to The Point of View. This is your favorite current affairs show on television. Here on The Point of View, we pick the right topics, get the right guests, typically ask them relevant questions on issues that matter to you. But every now and again, we have special shows. Tonight is a special show because we'll be analyzing the state of the Ghanaian banking sector on the basis of their financial statements released. All banks in Ghana by law are to release their financial statements. Typically, they do this by the end of March in a year. But this year, because of the challenges with our domestic debt exchange, the Bank of Ghana gave them 1 extra month to do this. So by 30th of April, all 23 banks were to have released their financial statements. We've seen 22 of them, and we've worked with our partners to analyze these balance sheets. I'm going to tell you what this means for you and your money and the economy of Ghana. Stay with us. So welcome back. So tonight on the show, we're going to look at the key indicators of our banking sector. We're going to do this for the big five. There are 23 banks in Ghana. As of the time we came on air, 22 had released their statements. We've analyzed about 21 of them. We're just going to look at what these banks have said about themselves, what has been happening in the economy insofar as the domestic debt exchange is concerned, and what this means for your money. We're going to start with the big five. We call it the big five because there are many ways of evaluating a bank. So you could decide to use their market capitalization, but this will only work for banks that are on the stock exchange. But we're using the assets of the bank. So the assets of a bank typically would involve the equity. So what the owners of the bank have put in by way of capital, and then of course what the public has given those banks by way of deposits. So when you put your deposits and your capital together, you have your assets. Now the 5 biggest banks in Ghana by way of assets are the following: Ecobank, GCB is number 2. Then you have Stanbic, Absa, and Fidelity. Very interesting mix. Ecobank is a foreign-owned bank with a mix of owners. GCB is a Ghanaian commercial bank. Then there's Stanbic Bank, South Africa, Absa, which is now South Africa, originally UK, and then Fidelity, which is local. So these are your big 5. These are your big 5, just like the big 5 in Africa. Let's start with the Ecobank, right? So in terms of assets, this is the biggest bank in Ghana. Let's give you a few points about Ecobank. Started in the early 90s. This is one of the most respected banks on the continent, by the way. This bank has 63 branches. Now, we didn't want to use branch network to assess banks because you will notice that there are banks bigger than Ecobank in terms of branch network, but Ecobank is the biggest bank in terms of assets. This is the important number. It's foreign-owned with capital scattered from all over the place. First indicator I want to look at for their financials is this one. The issue about whether they made a profit or not. We'll elaborate on this. That X there tells you they didn't make a profit. Now, we're going to show you the profit trend because profit is not just something you look at in a year. So what we've done with the team is to look at what's been happening since 2016. Now, look at 2016. Started well, and then 2017 sort of reduced a bit. 2018, it's not too bad. 2019, 2020, COVID year. Look at that. COVID year, 774 million cedis. That's a lot of money for one bank to make profit. Now, this is a year in COVID where Ghana's GDP growth rate was close to 0. Yet the bank grew. Toby Apede always talks about banks and the fact that their profit cycles are almost counter-cyclical to the economy's performance. And this is evidence of this. So they're rising steadily, 500 million cedis in 2018, 635 in 2019. In 2020, 774. Now, you'd have thought that COVID would make the bank suffer. Look at that. 2021, 886 million Ghana cedis. Fantastic job, all right? So the profit is on an upward trend, even though the economy has gone in booms and busts. But the big story for this evening and the big story for this year is 2022. Look at that. From a profit of 886 million, they made a loss of 53 million. That is incredible. Like, that is just incredible. And this is the story for most of the big banks. All right? Now, let's get into the numbers a bit more. So we're going to look at a few things. Profit before tax. How serious was the dent on profit before tax? All right? Now, check this out. The profit before tax, the percentage reduction is 106%. Because, of course, you are 800 million and you make a loss of 54 million. So clearly, your PBT has suffered a hit. So the arrow is pointing down. But this is interesting because their deposits have actually increased. And again, it's a trend we notice that a lot of these banks, even though they're not making that much profit this year, they're making losses, they are actually doing some interesting things. So, for example, their customer deposits, look at that, from 13 billion to 19 billion. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. In fact, their total assets, and don't forget, when you add your deposits to your capital, that's your assets. Assets are also looking pretty healthy. Look at that. So, on paper, this bank is doing well and is doing all the right things. But of course, we'll try and explain what happened with the big red in the middle. But customer deposits are going up. And indeed, the central bank confirms this because overall for the economy, deposits increased by over 20% for these banks. Assets also grew. So it's not as if the banks were all of a sudden doing something wrong. The macro fundamentals knocked a lot of them. Pre-tax profit margin, of course, it will come down because of the jump. This is a very important number I'll come back to for all the banks. Loan to deposit. A bank's job is to take money from people who have excess money and give it to those who need it. It's called financial intermediation. Now, the loan to deposit ratio, if I give a bank 100 cedis in deposits and they give 90 cedis to people in loans, their loan to deposit ratio is 90%. Right? Now, this number is very important for this discussion because the highest loan to deposit ratio in the country is below 50. Which means that if they get 100 million, they give 46 in loans. What are they doing the rest? We'll investigate that for you during this editorial. Right? So, yes, their loan to deposit is rising between 2021 and 2022, but it's still below 50. The African average for loan to deposit, 75%. Nigeria in 2017, their loan to deposit was 60%. The Central Bank of Nigeria ordered that every bank should increase their loan to deposit ratio to at least 65%. And they did. And here in Ghana, all our banks, I couldn't even find one with a loan to deposit ratio higher than 50%. That was a big story. The other issue is capital adequacy ratio. We'll talk about this also later on. As part of the Bank of Ghana's own admission that they were challenged with the economy, they introduced what they call regulatory forbearance. So they're basically saying that, look, we're going to be kinder in regulation. One of the most important numbers for a bank is what is called capital adequacy ratio. It's basically the capital you have as a percentage of your risk-weighted exposure to people who you owe, right? Now, that number, according to our law, should be 13%. But because of the debt exchange, the Bank of Ghana has reduced that to 10%. All right? So 13 is a good number. Anything other than 13 is great for this number. So this bank is 15. So the biggest bank in Ghana is not doing as badly. So why did they make a loss? That's what we'll try and address. But let's show you this summary of their income in a slide. Income statement analysis, right? So the key points to note on this one. Impairment loss on financial assets. This is the big story for 2022. 518%. There are other losses, right? So they lost net trading income, 84%. They do forex. Their treasury department does some interesting things. They made a loss, right? Fees and commission expense, they also, of course, 98% is an expense, so that's not a problem. But the net fees and commission income, 84, is big. But this is the biggest story. And you notice that for all our banks, this line is what is causing the challenge. I mean, it's an outlier, right? So what happened? We'll try and resolve this. One of the ways of looking to explain this is to look at where is the bank getting its income from? Because a bank lends money, right? So when you want to look at a bank's health, you look at what is called the interest income. And when we broke down the interest income, for this bank, it wasn't actually that bad. A lot of it is still coming from customer deposits. So they give credits to customers, they give loans to customers, and the customers pay back with interest. So loans and advances going up from 3 billion to 8 billion. All right? The investment in securities is checkered. So for Ecobank, you can't really see anything here. Their impairments, however, rose to 1.7 billion in the red in the corner there. So that's a big story to come and explain later. But let's do the top 5 and then we'll do some industry analysis. So first issue is that the big, and I'm going back to it to just show you, this is a big problem, 518. And this is domestic debt exchange. All right, let's go to our next bank. I'll move away from this. I'll come back. Let's go to GCB. Now, this bank is an interesting bank because this bank is the biggest domestic bank in Ghana. Now, look at GCB. Started in 1953, before Ghana became independent. This bank has over 150 branches, which is why we don't use branch network as an estimator of size, right? So this bank has the most branches. We went to Paga. They were there at the border. They're everywhere. Ownership is local. It's a Ghanaian bank. Made a loss. Everybody made a loss, except a few. I'll tell you the 5 who made profits. Very few banks made profits this year. All right? Now, let's look at their behavior for profit. Again, 2016 is going up. 2017, they came down a bit. New government. 2018, they recovered. Look at that. 2019, 2020. Again, COVID year, 2019, 611 million cedis profit. In a year, the economy of Ghana shrunk because of COVID-19. You would have thought that the effect of COVID will be felt the next year. You lie bad. 2021. Boom. 810 million Ghana cedis in profit. Wow. This is GCB. 810 million cedis in profit. This is amazing. All right, so you would think that the trajectory is right. They're obviously doing something right. And then what happens? 2022, booyaka. Think about that. You are trending upwards. A tornado hits you. We don't know whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or whatever. Look at what happens. You are moving from 810 in profit to 706 in a loss. This has to be investigated. This is absolutely big. Like, how do you do this? All right? So this is a big story for GCB. Let's go into the numbers. Profit before tax, of course, because of the big swing, it's a massive 180%, 87% dip. All right? Customer deposits, however, still went up. So on paper, they are raising the deposits from 13 to 17 billion. People are sending their money to the bank. It's not a bad thing. Assets are going up, which means it's well capitalized because customer deposits are going up. Capital is also not being touched at this point, up until 2022 ending, right? Profit before tax margin obviously came down. Again, the number that is worrying for me, loan to deposit, because this is a bank's job. Look at them. From 39, they dipped. So they are giving less of their deposits back as loans. This is a major problem. And this is our biggest government-owned bank. Loan to deposit ratio is below 40%. They have to do something about this. Capital adequacy ratio, again, it was 13 as the industry standard. It's been reduced to 10. Regulatory forbearance, thanks to Dr. Addison. They are not doing badly, right? Look at their number. Again, let's come here. When you look at their income statement analysis, comparing the 2021 to 2022, what are we seeing? Impairment. 543%. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Like, this is just unbelievable. Probably the biggest swing. What is causing this? Now, let's get into the numbers. This is our analysis. So, this is the game in town. The blue line is telling you the income they are getting from lending money to people, to businesses, to corporates. The black bar is income they are getting from investing in securities. All right? A lot of which are government securities. So it looks like a good game. 2016, income from securities was 2.6. Income from GOG, from credit, 1.4. Look at the gradient of the blue line. Is that steady? It moves from 1.4 to 5.48 in 2022. Look at the black bar. This is the nation's main bank in terms of national ownership. And it's lending to the government like crazy. 2.6, 4.8, 4.6 billion interest income, 6.3, 8.6, 9.7. So if you're giving most of your money to the government, it means you're not lending to people who need the money. So if the government says, I don't have money to pay, I'm doing DDE, you're going to take a big hit here. Boom, 543%. This is what happened. So the reason for this big hit here is this. And we'll come back to this because this is an important point. This is one of the most important points about the banking sector in Ghana. The pension to increase their holding of government bonds to the detriment of doing the real reason why they are here, lending to the public, right? So yes, the blue bar is not increasing that much. So this is why you have that 2.11 red. The red line, the red bar there is your impairment. So far, we're making sense. GCB, let's move to our next bank, and we'll wrap things up in terms of everything else. So GCB, we've seen the relationship between their appetite for government bonds and the big red line. Third largest bank by way of assets is Stanbic. In late 90s, some people say 2000, we're not sure. It used to be Standard Bank South Africa. 40 branches. Very big bank, 40 branches. Now, a lot of the banks are doing what they call branchless banking. And a lot of the banks are using technology, so they don't have to physically be everywhere. South African owned, your guess is as good as mine. Loss, okay? Made a loss. Again, let's look at their trajectory of profits. 2016, 223. 2017, 300 million. 330 million. 400 million. 454 million. They are sitting pretty. It's funny how all these banks, 2021, which is baffling. 2020 was COVID year. Like, the country ground to a halt. The economy shrunk. They made almost 500 million in profit. 2021, the year after COVID, which economists will say, oh, there's a lag in the COVID effect. They actually said, I'm trumping 2021. 648 million cedis in profit. I guess you know what's going to happen in 2022, right? There you go. 44 million in a loss. So I think we are seeing a trend here, aren't we? Let's run through quickly. Profit before tax, they are swing 107% dip. All right? Customer deposits, for some reason, people are still giving the banks money. Obviously because they are credible. Obviously because they are strong. Total assets also increase. All right? So profit before tax, it will come down. Loan to deposit ratio, again, this is an important number. The loan to deposit ratio is reducing from 43 to 38%. Something we should keep an eye on. Governor Addison should be worried about this. All right? And then capital adequacy ratio is the final one. This is pretty close to the regulatory. Indeed, had the figure not been reduced from 13 to 10, these guys would have been below the capital adequacy ratio. Already, we've been told that their parent bank has pledged to invest close to $80 million to recapitalize the bank. This was announced somewhere, I think, in February or March. So they sort of saw this coming. So a number of the foreign-owned banks have had announcements from their parent companies that are going to recapitalize the bank. That means that their assets are going to go up. Their CAR will do much better. But we're seeing a trend. Let's wrap up this segment with the two other banks. So again, look at this. There are impairments, because again, the impairments we showed you in the previous slide. Impairments are as a result. Impairment simply means, look, I lent money to somebody or I put money in an investment, but the investment or the money will not come back. It's been impaired. It's been hampered by a haircut or by the fact that government cannot pay. So again, a lot of reds here. And this is the main driver. So we're seeing a story. We want to tell it for the top 5 banks. We'll tell it for the others. Again, here's the facts behind the figures. Interest income breakdown. We keep emphasizing this point. A bank's job is to lend to customers. In this case, loans and advances to customers is in the black, right? So you notice that loans and interest from loans and advances is not that much. But look at government investment securities. 1.6, 1.8, 2.5, 3.9, 4.3. Look at where it's going. So this blue chart is what has accounted for this red line. Because this appetite for investment in securities predisposed almost all the banks. It was the biggest game in town. And I need to say that it's not just the banks. Even in the pensions industry, a lot of the private pensions companies were giving almost all their money to government. They were not doing anything with the money because, of course, the private pensions they only started paying pensions like a couple of years ago, unlike SNIT, right? So a lot of them have a lot of money, and they are not investing the money in companies. They are just giving the money to government. And government is adding a number to it and giving it back to them. So it's just going and back. And this is for many industries. Insurance, they do the same thing. So the elephant in the room is the government. But I need to be fair to some of the banks. So I'm going to give you a couple more. But just take a look at the investment in securities. What on earth is driving banks to be lending more and more money to a government? Oh, we're told government is safe. Say anecdotally, the government is the risk-free, the risk-free person to give money to. It's not true, right? Let's deal with Absa. Absa is the fourth. Let me run through Absa quickly before I take a short break. So Absa is older than Ghana, 1917. Guys, Absa is an old bank, just 56 branches. All right, GCB has 155. It's a foreign-owned bank, now South Africa, made a loss. Look at Absa's profit behavior. 2016, 423. 2017. Absa was the best performing bank in Ghana last year. I mean 2021, right? The year before this. Look at that. COVID-19 notwithstanding, Absa made a profit of 1 billion cedis. Unbelievable. This is great. It means that the guys working in the bank, they know their job. 1 billion cedis in profit. 2021. 1 billion. It's a lot of money. Let's decide what's going to happen here. Look at that. Boom. 500 million cedis in a loss. This is very serious. So from 1 billion profit to 500 million in a loss. This is serious. Take a look at that. Take a closer look at those numbers again. Right? You are doing well, going well. You even withstand COVID. So it's quite almost counter-cyclical. COVID comes, everybody is struggling. The bank is increasing profits. So it's the complacency that comes from giving money to government, thinking government is going to pay back, that leads to this. Let's look at the breakdown. Profit before tax, obviously the percentage dip is 153%, because from 1 billion profit to 500 million loss. Similar to the GCB story. Customer deposit, obviously going up. So confidence in the sector is high. People are still sending their money. Assets, look at that, from 16 to 17. Profit before tax margin, pre-tax profit margin is down. Loan to deposit. This number is what worries me. They were doing 60. So in 2021, everything about Absa was beautiful, because 60 is great. 60 is much better than what we've seen in the industry. 60% of the money they get. And the other point I need to make about loan deposit ratio is it doesn't have to be 100%, because if you give all your deposit back at loans, you will have liquidity problems, right? So there's a balance between maintaining your liquidity by making sure your loan deposit is not too high, but also it has to be high enough to lend money to those who need it. Because in Nigeria, as I said, when the real economy was not growing in 2017, Central Bank of Nigeria said, look, you guys, increase your loan deposit ratio. Don't keep the money in the vault. Stop sending the money to unprofitable uses. Lend to the real sector so the multiplier effect will take place. So there's a balance. The African average is 75%. How come in Ghana, all our banks are below 50%? The governor should be worried about this. We'll talk about capital adequacy in greater detail. But look at that. Their capital adequacy ratio, 19%. They don't have any problems with capital. Absa, they have money. So what is the consequence of all of this? There you go. We had to scale this. The percentages don't even make sense. 2,293%. Impairment loss on financial assets. What on earth is going on here? We try to explain that. Again, investment securities, look at the game. 2 billion, 2.5, 2.7, 4 billion, 4.8, 4.7, 5.4 billion. So interest income, the money is not going to the people. The money is going to Abine. Loans and advances, yes, not too bad. To be fair, it's rising in tandem. So it's not like they are reducing the interest income from their loans. But it's very clear that the biggest game in town is giving your money to government. And we needed to show this. And we have this for all the banks. And we're going to release these in series. Right? This is important for you to understand. Sometimes we talk about banking statements. It looks very complicated. This is actually what's happening. And there has to be a collective understanding of the challenge so that the government will do the right thing. All right? So this is the situation with Absa. Look at that. The impairment is in red. Boom. Impairment almost non-existent. Everything was going fine. 0.01, 0.02, 0. This bank made a profit of 1 billion cedis in 2021. COVID-19 notwithstanding. And the government's own policy decision, in addition to the excessive borrowing, which has led to the debt exchange and the impairment. Government can't pay. So now you have a high profit situation going down. Some people think there are advantages to this. We'll discuss that too. That if banks are making profit when we are all suffering, they also have to lose. And hopefully, in that loss, they will start investing in real things. We'll see how that works. I'll take a short break. When I come back, I'll wrap up with the fifth bank, which is Fidelity Bank. Then I'm going to look at some industry winners and losers, all with a view to give us more clarity. Mind you, this program, we're doing it in partnership with two of our partners, Finex Skills Hub, who are the best when it comes to data analytics and visualization. And of course, ThinkUp Investments. ThinkUp are the brain behind the numbers with their team, their research team, working with us to go through the bank statements, financial reports, and coming up with this very cogent analysis. This is the Point of View Special Edition, part 1 of our look at the banking sector, analyzing the bank statements and the reports. Stay with us.
Pepsodent introduces charcoal and lemon essence. The unique combination of natural essences whitens teeth naturally for you and family because every smile matters. New Pepsodent Herbal. Introducing a unique combination of herbal extracts in an antibacterial toothpaste for strong teeth and healthy gums that protects your family and you. Every smile matters.
Welcome back to The Point of View. So tonight is an editorial on the state of the banking sector following the release of the financials of our banks. Now, the Bank of Ghana gave the banks up to end of April 2023 to do this. We've seen financials for most of the banks except NIB. And the story is a story of bleeding. The banks are bleeding. We're trying to explain what is causing this bleeding. So what we've done is we've picked the top 5 banks by way of assets: Ecobank, Ghana Commercial Bank, Stanbic, Absa, and Fidelity Bank. And we're trying to explain why these banks, who seem to be doing so well by way of their trajectory, profits in even COVID year, all of a sudden had to lose. And the most important thing we've said today is that the impairments on their financial assets because of the debt exchange is the immediate cause. But there are structural issues. The structural issue of the appetite of banks to lend to government to the detriment of lending to the private sector, the real sector. Because it's been proven by many economists that the private sector is a more efficient allocator of financial resources than the government. Probably with the exception of a few sectors. For example, look at how much it cost Senyo Hosea and his friends to build the East Hospital. Look at the time they use. Look at the amount of money they use. Private people, we built a skills training center for an orphanage. When the government builds it, it's more expensive. So why on earth will Ghanaian banks be giving all their money to the government? Government will add an interest rate and give it back to them. Companies don't have money. The interest rates, the rate at which the risk-free rate that the BOG gives in their so-called, the so-called indicative rate is over 30%. Doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of challenges that the Bank of Ghana has caused itself. All right? But let's move on. So this is the Absa figure. Over 2,000% impairment loss. Very, very troubling indeed. And the story is a story of increasing appetite for government bonds as evidenced by the blue chart. Now, I wanted to finish this part with Fidelity Bank. Fidelity is an important bank. Started as a discount house, Edwedefa. Fidelity is our largest local bank, right? So a country needs a nice mix of things. So Ecobank, Pan-African Bank, African dominated. GCB is local but government, all right? Then you have Stanbic, South African. Then you have Absa, originally British South African. But you have Fidelity. Fidelity, Jim Baden, Edward Ifa and now, what's his name? I forget the name of the Julian Opuni. So this is a bank we need to succeed, right? So it's a fascinating story. As a discount house, look at where they've gotten to, okay? Established in 2006, relatively new bank. So this is the second year of Kufuor's government. 73 branches. They have more branches than Absa, more branches than Stanbic, all right? Ownership, local, all right? Of course, they made a loss. Let's look at their performance historically. 2016, only 19 million. 2017, 135. 2018, 242 million. 2019, look at how they are going nicely, right? 2020 COVID, 382. Everybody made a blockbuster profit in 2021. They should have seen this coming. It's like the year after COVID, we all recovered. We all made nice profit. Your guess is as good as mine. Look at that. This one is serious, from $500 million in profit to $500 million in a loss. This should concern us, right? And we need to learn from this crisis about how the government's own, and as I'm talking to you, T-bills are going through the roof. People are still lending to the government. All right, government is borrowing. So from a profit of 505 million to a loss of 519 million, this is serious. All right, let's go behind the numbers. Profit before tax, 200%. Because, of course, you move from 500 million to zero. That would be 100%. And then you've gone 500 million down. So that's another 100%. So that's why you have 203%. This is serious, okay? Look at the customer deposits. Again, people are they are mobilizing deposits from 8 to 9 billion, 19% increase. Assets also going up. All right? Tax, pre-tax profit margin, I won't talk too much about that. It's always similar to PBT in this case. Loan to deposit, they actually are increasing, right? So from 29 to 35%. Now, capital adequacy ratio, because of the risk-weighted nature of the calculation, a lot of these banks are in the teens, all right? And this is something the BOG will then eventually check. So we are not able to, we are just stating what they report. So one bank had 12, one had 18. We are just stating what they report. So this is 17. We're not saying it's wrong. We're simply saying there's no way we can tell. But these are audited financials. So obviously the auditors have gone through this. Again, look at this. Look at that. Impairment loss. That is the biggest story for today. Right? They even made a profit on their net trading income. So credit to them. But look at the impairment loss. All right? There's something obviously wrong with the way we organize. And now let's go into this. Loans and advances is the blue chart. Interest income from loans and advances, the gradient is a bit slim. Look at that. Investment securities, 1.6, 2.5, 3.4, 4.3, 4.9. 2021, I need to move and show. I mean, look at that. 771. And then 2022 as well. So no wonder this happened. Because if more and more of your interest income is coming from government, from securities generally, and then government bonds in particular, the challenge will happen. So this is the top 5. We'll do other banks later. We don't want to just bore you. Clearly, the pattern has been established. These are the top 5 bleeders in terms of absolute amounts lost due to impairment. Right? Absa, 2.12 billion. Now, these figures need to be looked at from the basis of the bank's own capital. Right? Because, for example, minimum capital requirement is 400 million. All right? Then some of the banks, because of their international nature, their parent bank will say we are going to inject further capital. So that capital should be able to absorb the loss. But we have to be concerned about the Ghanaian banks, because the government says they're going to raise some 15 billion cedis through their, I think they call it a GCTF, to recapitalize the banks. Look at the contrast. This is the oldest bank in Ghana. Their impairment is 2.2 billion, 2.1 billion. This is the newest bank in the country. This is foreign. This is interesting. The oldest bank in the country, the newest bank in the country, have the same problem. And they are almost the same amount. This bank was established around 2018. All right? This bank is 19 something, before all of us were born. Yet, they are in the same problem. Another local bank, GCB, 2.08, big one. And then Ecobank, the biggest bank in Ghana, 1.6. And then Carl Bank. When you put the top 5 banks in terms of their losses, now this is top 5 with the highest impairment, it's close to 10 billion. It's close to 10 billion. That's like $1 billion. Right? That's like $1 billion. Look, our banking sector is, in my view, epitomizes the dysfunction of our economy. Here we are look at Cocoa Board. As you see, Cocoa Board is looking for money. Every year since I went to class 1, Cocoa Board goes to borrow money to pay cocoa farmers and then sells the cocoa beans to get the dollars back. I think it's been only twice that they've been able to raise that money domestically. It means our financial sector is not that deep. Right? Yet you have 23 banks. How on earth do you have 23 banks and you can't even come together and finance the purchase of cocoa beans that you've been doing since Kwame Nkrumah's days? So the finances, so the profits that they show, I think they are not really going to the core of the economy's robustness. So banking sector profits is not an indication of a healthy economy. So BOG, when you do your analysis, in fact, let me read something the BOG did. BOG did their latest MPC report, March. Right? Let me read some of the things they said. Paragraph 10. Developments in the banking sector broadly reflected a challenging operating environment in 2022 on account of macroeconomic conditions and the recent implementation of the DDE, in which all 23 banks participated. Our preliminary assessment of the impact of the DDEP on the banking sector based on the December 2022 data indicates significant losses on account of impairment of the bank's holdings of GOG bonds. So he's saying that this is going to happen. All right? The impact of the DDEP as assessed is moderated by the timely introduction of regulatory release by the Bank of Ghana. Basically, they are saying we are the referee, so we can change the rules. Meanwhile, some analysts have said if you were to apply IFRS 9 to our 23 banks, up to 9 of them may not survive. But the Bank of Ghana can decide, well, we're going to change some of the indicators so the banks will survive. So we're going to reduce the capital adequacy ratio from 13 to 10. We may even re-inject our own capital in some of the banks. Because think about it, CBG. CBG has, let's assume their capital is even 400 million or 500 million. If you take a hit of 2 billion, what is your CAR? Right? Because your capital adequacy ratio is your tier 1, tier 2 capital over your risk-weighted credit exposure. Right? So if you add your tier 1 and tier 2 capital as a percentage of your risk-weighted credit exposure, it's supposed to be a positive number. Now, if your impairment is 2 billion, if you calculate that, what are we going to get? All right? So this is a pretty serious stuff. Now, the reason I'm reading is that the Bank of Ghana seems to always talk up the things. It's like, the impact of the DDP is moderated by the time introduction of regulatory release by the Bank of Ghana to support the banking sector, similar to those reliefs provided to the banks at the onset of COVID. Well, at the onset of COVID, you provided reliefs, and the banks stayed. They were strong. But now look at the loss you've given them. How are they going to recover from these losses? Okay? As a result, the industry is still fairly resilient. This is my problem. It's resilient, but is it doing financial intermediation? You've announced that non-performing loans have reduced from 16 to 15 or something. So it's not as if we are not paying back the money to the bank. But when we give them money, they don't give it back to us. Their loan-to-deposit ratio is all below 50. So the banking sector is not doing its job. So if you say they are resilient insofar as they will survive and they will make more profit. But what they are supposed to do for us, we need money to expand. We are building studios, buy cars to do business. People are building hospitals, hotels. Nobody's going to go to a bank to get them. 30% interest? What kind of business would you do in a country? Now think about this. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. If the interest rate a bank gives you on a loan is even 30%, what kind of business will you do that just the cost of finance, you have to make enough money to pay 30% on the cost of finance? We haven't added cost of infrastructure. We haven't added cost of land. We haven't added cost of labor, which is all increasing. Just the cost of finance. So I'm going to borrow 1 million to do a business. I'm supposed to pay 30% of that as interest. I go and buy a land and pay 3 chiefs because everybody says the land is for them. Then I have to go and hire people and work for me. Then I have to go and buy a machine. What kind of business will I do that I will make so much money that I will pay back just the finance part 30%? This is what we mean by the real sector. So the banking sector should not look at this as, it's just a one-off. So we are going to come back next year stronger. That's not the issue. You are not doing your job. And this has exposed the fact that you are lending to government, a government that itself is not an efficient allocator of resources. So if I were you, I would not simply try and say, this is just a blip. Like a lot of them are publishing. Think about it. You've made huge losses in 2022. What are they doing? They are publishing Q1 2023 to show that things are not that bad. So 2023, dear, our first quarter results are even nice. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why don't you admit that what has happened is symptomatic and a symptom of a much deeper problem? That you are the only people making profit. You are making profit. In fact, they call it supernormal profits. People have said this for many years. Now, the dash has hit the fan. This is where we are. Let's show you a few more things. Again, CBG. This is a Ghanaian bank. I'm not picking on them. Now, I understand 2018, 2019 is a new bank. Okay? So if a new bank comes into the system, because of the circumstances in which they were formed, you don't expect their interest income to come from deposits. They are now mopping up deposits. So when they get their deposit, they go and invest it. So this 6.2 billion 2018 is great. 2019, 5.4. For them, because of the particular nature of the bank and how they started, I would say this is actually a good trend. But what happened in 2020? You would have thought that this will come down and this will go up. So the blue is supposed to go up. It goes up, but the black also went up. So what happened? Is it that there was some new offer from the government that made this go up? You get my point? So yes, I expect that as a new bank, the blue will keep going up. But I expect the black to come down. But the black also went up, which is why the red is there. Right? So this is not good for the economy. And mind you, this is 5 banks that became one. So they have a lot of work to do. The government may need to find money to capitalize it. All right? They have a lot of work to do. Okay? Now, let's come to Cal Bank. Again, a local bank. You know, when I did I'm bringing Cal Bank because this is a bit troubling for me. Absa, we've already discussed. We've discussed GCB. We've discussed Ecobank, GCBG. Cal Bank as well. I think it's the second largest local bank. 1.4 billion is troubling, right, in terms of impairment. And I'm trying to see where this is coming from. Loans and advances, it's a mixed picture. But 2021, this is what happened. This is where the problem occurred. 2021, this is where the problem occurred. So far, so the loans and advances is okay, it goes up. 2019, came down a bit. But this is where the game is. Look at the black. Keeps going. This is where the problem occurred. And now all of them are bleeding. All right? So we expect the Bank of Ghana, beyond announcing regulatory reliefs, to use this opportunity to correct the deeply flawed structural challenges facing our banking sector. Spreads between deposit interest rates, right, and lending rates are too high. When you talk about a spread, simple example, I have 100 cedis. I give it to a bank. The interest rate they promise me after a year, maximum 10%. That's their cost of funds. They lend that money to the cameraman, and they charge him 30%. Now, that 20% spread is the bank's profit. This is really what's going on. The economy of Ghana is highly financialized. It means that there's more money doing little work. The biggest game in town is putting your money in a bond or an instrument, and then after a year, they'll add something to it. You are not lending to people who are doing agric. You are not lending to people who are doing roads. You are not lending to people who are building schools. You are not lending to people who are building new hospitals. A friend of mine is building a hospital. He needs money. Nobody's giving him money. Yet, they are buying government paper. That is not a healthy bank. So, shame on all of us. And I think the Bank of Ghana should admit that they have presided over a flawed banking system, and the DDE just exposed the flaw. Because not all banks made losses. When we come back, I'll show you the banks that made profit. Because it tells you that part of the problem was the choices these banks made. And I hope we are not taking this as an attack on the banks. We are hoping that this crisis will be too important to allow to go waste. That the Bank of Ghana will come up with some deeply structural reforms that will reform this lopsided banking equation. This is the point of view. Tonight is an editorial. It's on the banks. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us.
Finally, anyone can become a house owner.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You Go Flip, a real estate gaming platform that allows you to play and stand a chance of winning a house or cash or consolidated funds, such as savings towards a house. Simple and easy to play. Visit www.yougoflip.com. Buy a ticket to enter the game. Wait for the end of the game to enjoy the win. Anyone can win. Flip it or own it. You Go Flip. This advertisement has been vetted and approved by the Gaming Commission of Ghana. Play responsibly, not for persons below 18 years, and gaming can be addictive.
Welcome back. The point of view tonight is analyzing the financials or the books, the reported financial accounts of the banks, 23 banks. So far, we've seen about 21, 22. We did this work with FinCap. FinCap are investment bankers. Their research team helped us do the analysis, validated all the calculations. So most of this is banks' data that has been audited that we decided to go beyond what they reported to now try and find out why this is important. So, for example, this number, this thing we did, you wouldn't see this on the financial statement. You would go into the notes. So when you go into the notes, then they now explain where their interest income is. So if you go into a typical bank, they will just give you, interest income, 20% increase. All right? But what you do is go into the notes, and then you will now get a breakdown. And we see this is the biggest story. And the reason I'm doing is that I said this 6 months ago. In fact, I think a year ago, we made a point about how banks were only buying government bonds and not lending. So it's not as if we are saying, like, I told you so, to think that we know how to run the banks. We are just saying that there are deep flaws in the way the government runs the economy on the financial side. And the BOG has to take some of the blame, okay? Now, the biggest... So we dealt with the big losers when it came to the impairments. So Absa, in terms of this, but we're saying that absolute figures alone don't tell the story, because you need to look at the bank's capital, and some of these banks' shareholders. For example, the government of Ghana has said they will recapitalize our banks. So CBG and GCB will get money. The government initially wanted to pump $1 billion into the banks. So that suggests that these guys will get the money, more of the CBG, the Ghanaian banks, because these guys, South Africans and owners will give them their money, right? So that $1 billion, of which the World Bank promised to give us $250 million in terms of a debt, a credit, a loan. A lot of that money is going to capitalize these banks, all right? But let's go into the top 5 banks, the highest losses. Or again, CBG, all right? This is the loss, profit before tax. It's a loss, all right? Car Bank, $1 billion. GCB, $700 million. Absa, $500 million. And all of these guys made very good profits the previous year. Zenith Bank as well, 500. A lot of banks made about $500 million in losses. When we add all the bank losses, the figure is pretty big. All right? So there has to be urgent recapitalization, and we don't know if the Ghana Financial Stability Fund is kicked in. Finance Minister said there was some 15 billion cedis that we're going to pump in. That money has to come quickly. Otherwise, these banks will be in serious trouble. All right? Now, it's not such a bad story throughout. And as I said, we are doing this for all the banks. We'll release another analysis later on. But I just wanted to end by saying that some banks did make profit. All right? Some banks did make profit. These are the top 5 profit banks in the year, ending December 2022. GT Bank is a Nigerian bank, 190 million. SG is a French bank, 171 million. FBN is a Nigerian bank, 102. There's an interesting coincidence of the Nigerian banks, which we have to discuss in our next episode. We have to discuss the Nigerian banks because apart from this bank, this is Nigeria, this is Nigeria, this is Nigeria, this is Nigeria. So what are they doing right? Do they know something we don't know? All right? Or is it the fact that because they are close, I don't want to speculate, but there has to be some reason. Because I've already told you that in their own country, the loan-to-deposit ratio is much higher. The average loan-to-deposit ratio in Ghana is below 50%. It's actually below about 40%. But in Nigeria, per the law, loan deposit is 65. So 65% of the deposits you receive, you must give it back as loans. So how come in Ghana, all our banks are doing below 50? That's the question we should ask. Well, where are they putting the money? They are giving it to the government. That's what's going on. We are in a high interest rate environment which is destructive to business. Talk to AGI. Talk to Guta. Talk to... All these organizations are suffering. Now, I need to say that some of the losses we saw in the previous slides, we are not saying all the losses are attributed to the impairment. Because there are losses that are occasioned by the fact that customers also take money and don't repay. So that's impairment from customers, loans. But there's also losses occasioned by Forex. So, for example, you finance a project in dollars. When the person started paying the money, the cedi was 6 to the dollar. By the time October 2022 hit, the cedi was now 12. You have to look for more cedis to pay back that same amount. So you also make a loss there. So the macro environment has contributed to this. But we are saying that the determinant factor is the impairment. The determinant factor is the impairment. This one. This is the big story, which has led to this. All right? But let's reflect on this. What are these guys doing that the others are not doing? How come all of these guys, of course, in the losses there was Zenith Bank, right? But GT is Nigerian, FBN is Nigerian, UB is Nigerian, FAB is Nigerian. There has to be some... So we'll go behind these guys' numbers in our next episode to try and understand, okay, what are these guys doing? Where are they lending their money? What are they doing? Which is insulating them. All right? Then we also will look at other banks in the middle. See, there are a lot of banks in Ghana. All right? We haven't mentioned a lot of them. There's Access Bank. Okay, there's ADB. The other episode will look at the loan book. Okay? Who are banks giving money to, apart from government? So their money that they are giving to customers, are they giving it to construction? Are they giving it to education? Are they giving it to agriculture? Are they giving it to other banks? Are they giving it into Galamsey? We will find out. That's very important because for financial intermediation to work, the banks are protected because they have the highest standards globally. And that risk assessment they do allows them to be very efficient in allocating resources. So if after all the education, after all the Basel 2, Basel 3, Basel whatever, their risk assessment led to this type of situation, there has to be something said about the quality of the analysis being done. And we all need to be concerned. This is an economy that the IMF has predicted will grow lower than originally thought. So, we have to be concerned that the main driver of financial inclusion and the main engine for an economy's growth, which is finance, is not getting to the place it's needed. So, a lot of discussions you're having in the economy about things being hard is because people don't have access to money. The guys who are supposed to be trained in allocating money, taking it from those who have excess of it and giving it to those who need it to work and return to the person who owns the money, it's not happening well. Financial intermediation is a key function in the economy. And the central bank has to explain beyond perfunctory regulatory reliefs what structural changes it's going to make to ensure that this doesn't occur again. We'll also talk about the finance ministry and the haircuts. That also had a role, the mark-to-market losses. But so far, we hope we've given you a good initial picture of the situation with our banks. And we will come back next week with more. Thanks to our partners, Finex Skills Hub, who are masters in data analytics, data visualization, helping us with all the beautiful images you see. And of course, ThinkUp Investments, helping us dive deeper into the data, bringing insight to the information. So thanks to the team at ThinkUp as well. And to my team at Citi, the research team, for helping, Jude and co, for putting all of this together. I really hope the banks don't see this as some attack against them. We're trying to make them do better. And we are raising the bar in scrutinizing their reports so that they can perform the role they were set up to do in a more effective way. Thank you for watching. My name is Ben Alavle. We'll see you next time. Stay with Citi TV. Have a good night.